They didn't know his name, but they laughed anyway. When Isaac Lowell walked into Brookhaven High for the first time, carrying nothing more than a leather briefcase and a quiet smile to Brainstorm, the air shifted, not in respect, but in ridicule. His presence didn't command silence. It invited whispers. He wasn't tall or loud or built like the gym teacher everyone adored. He wore soft cotton slacks, a blazer with frayed elbows, and on the lapel, a small rainbow pin, subtle, almost invisible to anyone not looking for it. But someone was. Trey noticed first. The golden boy of the school, son of a state senator, quarterback, influencer. With one swipe, Trey had his phone aimed at Isaac's back. Then his voice filled the room with mock elegance. "Meet our new sub, Mr. Rainbow, teaching us about sad poems and sadder lives." Laughter erupted, the kind that doesn't wait to understand, only to echo. Isaac didn't flinch. He didn't ask for silence. He simply walked to the whiteboard, uncapped a black marker, and wrote slowly, without a word. Sometimes the ones who laugh the loudest are the ones hurting the most. The room quieted, but only for a moment. Not from understanding, but confusion. The kind that doesn't know if it's been insulted or seen. Trey rolled his eyes and sank into his chair. Some followed. A few didn't. Among them was a boy at the back, face half shadowed by the window light. He didn't laugh, didn't move. He stared at Isaac, not with disdain, but something else. Recognition. His name was Leo. He was 16, wore black long-sleeved shirts even in heat, and sketched in the margins of his notebook instead of taking notes. For the rest of the day, he didn't blink much, especially not when Isaac walked by. Isaac introduced himself simply. "I'm Mr. Lowell. I'll be covering literature for a few weeks. Let's begin." But no one listened. Phones stayed out. A group in the back played music through a Bluetooth speaker hidden in a sleeve. Someone threw a paper plane. Another snuck a video of Isaac's shoes and added a cringe filter. Still, he continued, with a quiet that refused to be broken. He taught the poem Dover Beach that day, talked about silence and despair, about tides and retreating faith. Most students barely looked up, except Leo. The bell rang. Everyone bolted, except Leo, who lingered just a second longer. His eyes stayed on the board, on the sentence Isaac had written. Then he turned and left, not in silence, but with something stirring behind his gaze. Outside, the hallway buzzed with gossip. "Did you see his pin? Trey's video is blowing up. Is he even allowed to wear that? So gay." Isaac stayed behind to clean up the wrappers, the torn papers, the laughter that still clung to the air like smoke. He erased the board last. But that sentence, he rewrote it once more before leaving, in smaller print, just above the ledge. "Being seen isn't always safe, but hiding never saved me either." That night, Isaac sat alone in his apartment, watching Trey's video go viral. Hundreds of likes, comments like knives. He didn't delete his account. He didn't report the post. He closed his laptop and made a note in his journal. Day one, they laughed. He didn't write a second line, but in the dark, he knew. Someone in that classroom hadn't laughed, and that was enough. If this story moves something in you, follow us for more true to the heart tales at Heart Story. Your story matters, and it deserves to be heard. By the second week, Isaac Lowell knew their games. They weren't clever, not yet, but they were relentless. Every day brought a new test of how far they could push the substitute who wouldn't raise his voice. One morning, someone switched his lesson plan with a list of celebrity breakups. Another day, he arrived to find a chalk drawing of two men kissing scrawled across the board, with his name labeled underneath. He wiped it off without a word, but he didn't erase it quickly. He let it sit there, just long enough for the ones responsible to feel exposed by their own joke. Then, quietly, he began class. Still, the resistance didn't stop. It deepened. Julia, the girl everyone called the whale behind her back, was halfway through a presentation on Sylvia Plath when Trey tapped something on his phone. Suddenly, The classroom projector lit up with a video, an old clip from a swim meet. Julia falling clumsily into the pool. Laughter erupted. Phones came out. Screens lit with cruelty. Julia froze. Oh boy. She looked toward Isaac, not for help, but for an escape. Her eyes brimmed, her lips trembling. And then she sat down, mid-sentence, and lowered her head. Isaac didn't scold. He didn't panic. He walked to the front of the room, turned off the projector, and pulled a chair beside her. He didn't say her name. He didn't touch her shoulder. He just sat. And after a moment, he said quietly enough for the whole class to hear, "No one has the right to make you feel you're less than worthy of being seen." It was the first time the room had gone completely silent, until Trey scoffed from the back. "Mr. Rainbow wants us to cry now." Isaac looked up, slowly. "I was expelled from middle school when I was 13, he said. "I kissed my best friend, a boy. They told me I made the others uncomfortable." He paused. No one moved. "I understand what it feels like to be treated like a mistake." For the first time, there was no retort, no laugh. Just the quiet discomfort of being made to face what they had become. That night, an email was sent to the principal's inbox from an anonymous parent. It read, "Mr. Lowell is encouraging ideas that go against family values. My son says he's turning the classroom into therapy. I'm concerned this is not appropriate for public education." The next morning, Isaac was called into the front office. The principal didn't look up as she spoke. "Isaac, there's been some concern, nothing official yet, but it's best to avoid discussing personal history in class. Just stick to the curriculum." Isaac nodded, but as he walked out, past the row of framed alumni photos and fading trophies, he paused in front of one plaque, the year the school nearly shut down due to budget cuts. He stared at it longer than he needed to. Back in class, the students watched him closer now, some with caution, others with something like guilt. Julia came early that day. She placed a paper on his desk, not homework, but a note. "Thanks for not looking away." Leo sat in the back as always, but he didn't sketch. He just watched. Watched the teacher who didn't flinch. Watched the man who didn't hide. The classroom hadn't changed yet, but the silence was starting to say more than the noise. It was during a routine check of class journals that Isaac noticed something strange. Leo's notebook was filled with drawings, not doodles, not aimless scribbles, but entire worlds rendered in black ink, cityscapes drenched in shadow, faces half hidden behind fences, mirrors, glass. But none of the faces had eyes. Most had no face at all. Isaac paused on one sketch in particular, a boy standing alone in the middle of an empty classroom, surrounded by figures with mouths wide open, no ears, no hearts. At the bottom, in small handwriting, Leo had written, "I hear them more when I don't speak." After class, Isaac waited. As the students left in waves, he called softly, "Leo." The boy froze. "I saw your sketches," Isaac said gently. "They're remarkable." Leo shrugged, eyes fixed on the floor. Isaac asked, "Why don't you draw yourself?" For the first time, Leo looked at him. "Because I don't know what I look like," he said. "Not really. And if I don't know, I can't draw it." Isaac didn't respond with comfort. He let the silence land and stay. Some truths deserve to breathe. The next day, Isaac designed a new writing prompt for the class. Describe someone you think no one understands, not even themselves. No grading, no structure, just truth. One student wrote about her father, a decorated veteran who never spoke a word at home and once cried during a cereal commercial. Another wrote about a sibling lost to addiction, someone whose memory the family had erased like a stain. Julia handed in 3 pages about her mother, who once ran a flower shop and now slept through most days, tired from fighting cancer for a second time. And Trey didn't turn anything in. Instead, he laughed when Isaac asked and said, "I'm not broken enough for your assignments." Later that week, a fire alarm rang mid-morning. Students flooded the hall. Chaos, laughter, phones out. When they returned, the school library was in shambles. Books torn, chairs overturned. A window cracked. On one shelf, someone had scrawled, "No freaks allowed," in permanent marker. The cameras in the hallway had been mysteriously disconnected. But when questioned, Trey pointed at Leo. "He was the last one in," Trey said. "I saw him go in." Leo didn't protest. He just stood there, silent, staring at nothing. By noon, Leo was suspended, no hearing, no evidence. Just an official call home and a note in his record. Isaac tried to speak to the principal, but the answer was short. "We can't take chances," and Leo has always been withdrawn. That night, Isaac sat at his kitchen table with a glass of water untouched. He opened his bank app. His savings were modest, built over years of tutoring, part-time jobs, and what remained from another life. He made a transfer. He didn't attach a note. He didn't sign a name. But Leo's mother would receive it the next morning. Enough to hire a youth advocate. Enough to demand a proper review. Isaac closed his laptop. He didn't need to be thanked. He only needed the truth to have a chance. It started with a question whispered between students at lunch. "Have you ever Googled Mr. Lowell?" At first, it was just a joke, the kind passed around out of boredom, curiosity, or suspicion. One student typed his name into the search bar, then another. Then the entire group at table 7 leaned in to see. There it was. An article from a small education magazine. Published years ago, anonymous donor saves dozens of public schools from closure. At the bottom, a mention of the Lowell Fund, a private charity founded by Isaac Lowell, a former educator turned advocate for underserved schools. There was a photo, blurry, low resolution, but unmistakable. The same slight figure in a dark blazer, the same quiet smile, the same tiny rainbow pin on the lapel. Gasps followed, then a silence even louder. Because in the middle of that article, it listed the schools helped, and Brookhaven High was one of them. 4 years ago, the school had been on the brink of collapse. Low test scores, budget cuts, teacher strikes. A last-minute grant had saved it. Under one condition, the donor would remain anonymous. Now they knew. The news traveled fast. Phones lit up. Screenshots were shared. Even students who had never spoken to Isaac suddenly looked at him differently, like he had become something more than human. A contradiction they couldn't place. That afternoon, Julia passed him a folded paper. She didn't speak, just left it on his desk. Inside, it read, "You didn't have to say anything because you are the proof." But not everyone was silent. The principal called him in just before dismissal. Her voice was clipped. "Isaac, we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand." She slid a printed email across the desk. It was from a state official, a complaint about Isaac's undue influence and his inappropriate proximity to students. Vague words that carried weight when attached to power. Then she looked up. "Trey's father sent this." "You remember Senator Clarkson?" Isaac nodded calmly. The principal's voice lowered. "You were once nominated to serve on the state education board." "I remember. And then you withdrew." Quietly. Isaac didn't answer. She continued. "They said you didn't meet character standards, that your lifestyle would cause distractions." Still, Isaac didn't flinch. "I'm telling you this because I want to help, but we can't protect you if this becomes a political fight." At that, Isaac finally spoke. "I didn't come back to fight. I came back to rebuild what people like him let fall." That evening, Trey sat in class for the first time without speaking. He didn't scroll, didn't smirk, just stared at the board, as if trying to read what wasn't written. And Leo. He returned the next day, not because the school reversed their decision, but because his mother walked in, with a lawyer by her side. and handed the administration a file Isaac had quietly helped prepare. The file contained years of drawings, letters, patterns of silence. Leo wasn't just a student anymore. He was a witness, and Isaac was no longer just a substitute. He was a name that couldn't be erased. The auditorium lights flickered once, then dimmed. It was the final assembly of the school year. Rows of students filed in with their usual indifference, earbuds in, shoes untied, eyes glued to screens. Teachers stood scattered by the walls. The principal adjusted the microphone, made her standard remarks about growth and potential and moving forward. Then she introduced Isaac Lowell. There was no applause. He wasn't scheduled to speak. His name hadn't been on any of the programs. But when she stepped aside, Isaac walked up to the stage with the same quiet presence he had brought into every classroom since day one. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't ask for silence, because the silence was already there. As he stood behind the podium, something unexpected happened. From the middle row, a student stood up, then another, then 5, then 10, until entire sections of the auditorium were rising. Students of all kinds, from the shy to the loud, from the ones who once laughed at him to the ones who never said a word. Every single one wore something small but unmistakable. A rainbow pin, on backpacks, on jackets, on shoelaces, taped to notebooks, hand-drawn on stickers. No one had planned it, no announcement, no student council campaign. It had happened on its own. A quiet rebellion, a classroom finally looking back at itself. Then, from the center aisle, Trey walked forward. He didn't speak until he was just a few feet from Isaac, face to face with the man he once called a joke. "I thought you were the weakest person I'd ever met." Trey said, "Uy." His voice was tight. "But turns out, you were the only one who never needed power to have strength." He turned, walked down the steps, and took his seat. Next came Leo. He didn't say a word. He just handed Isaac a single sheet of thick sketch paper. It was a portrait, the first one he had ever finished with a complete face. And it was Isaac, drawn not as a teacher or a donor or a substitute, but as someone standing in the middle of a storm, holding open a door. Isaac looked at it for a long moment. Then he spoke. "I didn't come here to teach you how to succeed," he said. "I came to show you that being seen fully, truthfully, without shame is not something you have to earn. It's something you already deserve." He paused, his voice steady. "And sometimes the greatest lessons come from surviving the silence." That evening, a new plaque was hung above the main entrance of Brookhaven High. It didn't mention test scores or championships or famous alumni, just a single line: Brookhaven High, rebuilt by Lowell, remembered by its students. And underneath, in smaller print, for those who were once invisible but chose to stay. How would you honor someone who once made space for you to be yourself? When no one else did, share your story in the comments. Follow Heart's Story for more stories that echo long after the bell rings. Your voice matters. Your truth deserves to be told.